And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you, Akwaba, and welcome. Welcome to another round of Culturally Conscious Communications here on the LIV Radio, LIV TV, and LivingInBlack.com networks. My name is Keidi Awadu, a.k.a. The Conscious Rasta. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. on the West Coast, that's 12 noon on the East Coast listeners, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together to deal with culture, consciousness, Pan-African development, sustainable development, all areas of human interactivity and human development. Today's date is Thursday. It is the 11th of March, the year 2021. In the Western calendar, this corresponds to the year 60 to 61 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, and LivingInBlack.com. I have a spectacular program for you today. This, I anticipate, should be one of the most important programs from a Pan-African sustainable development perspective that we have had definitely all year, and maybe since the last time this particular guest was on the program. I've known him for a few years now, and I tell you, this is one of the most admirable Pan-African practitioners that I've ever met. He is my role model. He's at such a long biography that I have to truncate it. I want you to go to his website and spend an hour or two reading through his activities. Meredith Beal, Brother Meredith Beal, I might want to call him, chairman of Lasting Value Broadcasting Group, came to Africa as a Knight International Journalism Fellow assigned to the African Media Initiative to lead a multi-country project to improve business management practices at media organizations in Africa, creating new revenue streams and developing sustainable business models that can be replicated at media organizations across the continent. He's a former RIAS Berlin Fellow and National Association of Broadcasters Fellow author. He is an author with 2 books published in 2012, Victory Every Day, collection of poems, prose, and song lyrics, as well as 10 tips for managing the migration to digital television, a handbook for African station managers. And I'm going to cut the bio right there and introduce my brother, Brother Meredith Akwaba. Welcome back once again to your LIV Radio.
Greetings, my brother. How are you doing, sir?
We black and we shine, and I think you can tell by the enthusiasm in my voice, I am always happy to have you on as my guest. You inform, enlighten, and excite us about what's happening around the African world.
Well, thank you, sir. Always a pleasure to be on your show. I love the work that you're doing and bringing the global African community together and informing them, which has been one of our biggest challenges is communication and data between all of us. Mm-hmm. So definitely a pleasure every time I get an opportunity to talk with you and share with you and your network of folks.
That's right.
It's such a critical time. I mean, so much has been going on since we talked last. Whole bunch of stuff.
That's right. Now, just a little bit more of your background, because it spans so much. It's almost unbelievable that one person could be doing this. You probably are really triplets and just fooling the rest of us. But you also have a background as an actor. You've been in a number of different film screen engagements. Am I correct?
Yes. Out of fun, I guess. I don't call myself an actor. I've never been interested in acting as an art, mm-hmm. But it was fun. And how it evolved in terms of the couple of movies I've been in was really out of friendship. Mm-hmm. Brother Reginald T. Dorsey, you might remember him from 21 Jump Street in the 60s, early 70s. So he's an actor and a cowboy. One of the handful of African-American actors who are rodeo cowboys. Mm-hmm. So he is originally from Dallas, Texas, and I was in Austin for the longest, And so one time he had, I was talking like, when you coming to Austin? So he was scouting for a film that they were getting ready to do, and were in Alabama. So it was a period film set in the 1930s Depression era South. And so they had gone down there looking for sites. And then he said, so before then, he was in Houston filming a movie. And Houston's like a 2-hour drive from where I was living. It's like, hey, why don't you come down up? Mm-hmm. He never got around to having time to do that. So when they were scouting in Alabama, they decided they would stop in Austin on the way back to L.A. When they stopped at Austin, I connected them with the Film Commission, the Texas Film Commission, and they started scouting locations there and found a perfect place about 30 minutes from Austin. So they brought the crew down there. The movie is called Kings of the Evening, and it was written by Andrew Jones and his father, and Andrew, his father, and Reggie were the executive producers. So now when they came down to do the movie, you know, the white film production community is not used to black folks being in charge. Mm. So Reggie pulled me along to watch his back. So one example might be they would bring a chair for the director, but not for the producer, which is him, you know, and just subtle things, and then some not so subtle things. So I was there primarily to watch his back, and because I have a variety of skills, I wound up becoming a set videographer, and they found a role for me in the film. So the film is called Kings of the Evening, starring Tyson Beckford, Tyson's first film, you know, leading role in the film, and Lynn Whitfield, Glenn Turman, an incredible positive black story about, and the story is leveraging a cultural phenomena of some people called the Swinkers in southern Africa. And so these men who were working in the mines and in the slaughterhouses and et cetera were looking for a way to encourage each other and instill some pride in themselves. So they were scrimping save for a piece of clothing, and then another piece of clothing with the target of accumulating enough to get an outfit to participate in this fashion show. Okay. So it's a fashion show that the men put on for each other. And they might go home with a loaf of bread or $5 or, you know, it's just something showing that they can come home as men. So Mr. Jones who came up in the South in the 30s, saw that article in a New York newspaper and decided to write about that story, but he didn't know anything about the idioms of South Africa, so he put it in southern U.S. So that's it's a really good film that you should see, Kings of the Evening. After that was over, and there was another antidote that happened during that, which is that the unions from L.A. got wind that the production was going down there, and they went down there demanding participation and et cetera. And Reggie had approached the Teamsters Union about, you know, we're getting ready to do a film, you know, here's what we need. And the quote he got was so outrageous that he just went on and went back to Dallas, where he's from, and got several of his buddies who were truck drivers, and they put together the transportation movement. Okay. And whereas the white folks thought that they had him in a corner. So then then they boycotted it. So it was trouble. So we were in a meeting, and they brought all the union leaders. They even wanted a donation for me. I'm not in SAG, but they wanted them to make a donation on behalf of me to the Christmas fund, and, you know, all kind of just, it's gangster. Oh,
this was SAG making these demands?
These were the various unions, yes. Okay. SAG and the 3 or 4 unions representatives came to Austin, Texas to talk about this. Now, again, at the time, I was Texas Broadcaster of the Year. I was one of the people who wrote Texas's Freedom of Information Act, and well known. So I had at the meeting somebody from the Attorney General's office just sitting there quietly. And then when they came to press, then I asked Mr. I said, excuse me, Mr. I forget his name from the Attorney General's office. That sounds like a threat to me. And it changed the whole tone of the thing, so they had to back off.
Wow. Now, you have owned...
But after that movie was over, I was talking to some of the people in the crew, and I was like, oh, what are you up to next? And they said, well, he works on Friday Night Lights, the television series about Texas high school football. So I called him, and I wound up doing several episodes of Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
Once as like a journalist one time. I was a customer in a bar while they were and for me, I was just having fun, hanging out.
That's right.
You know, get paid for a day and just have some fun. Other than that, I might have been this particular episode. We were in a bar watching the sports bar watching the World Series, which was literally on. If I wasn't there, I'd have been at home on the couch watching the World Series. So this way, I'm having fun. I'm on in a movie and getting paid. So that's what started it. And then just before I left Texas, the same producer who did Friday Night Lights did the movie Bernie, starring Matthew McConaughey and Jack Black. Okay. So I wound up playing in two roles there. One was I was visiting what was to be my nephew in prison. And I went to visit him, and next to us talking is Jack Black and this woman. So Jack plays this. It's a dark comedy. So Jack is the murderer behind bars, and I'm sitting next to them talking with my nephew. And then another scene, I'm in the courtroom. So all those again for me were just fun. But when I got to Africa, I wound up in the process of my endeavors to enhance the quality of the content that African production companies and producers and filmmakers are doing. So in the process of working with the FEFAC, which is the French acronym for the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers, they represent, it's a wing of the African Union Culture Commission. They represent about 1,000 or so filmmakers in 40 countries. And I established an alliance between them and the African Media Initiative, my organization, which is the largest umbrella organization of media owners on the continent, to look at how we can work with the African Union to create higher quality and a better volume and ability for more filmmakers to make money. So in the process of doing that, the African Union has been working on two items. One is an African Film Commission and an African Film Fund. And the Film Fund is looking to take contributions from various countries, you know, however the country decides to make the input. Maybe it's fuel tax, maybe it's the, utility, whatever it is, how they make their country's contribution to this fund. And then the intention is to have a greater flow of films coming out of the continent. So in the process of talking with the Africa Channel, which is headquartered in Los Angeles, actually, it's the Africa Channel was probably a 30-year-old cable channel. But in the last few years, we've been talking, and they just launched, maybe 2019 or so, they launched a streaming platform for the African continent. So now there are quite a number. But in the process of me talking with them and figuring out if we could work together, they called me one day out of the blue and said, hey, while we're talking, we happen to be doing this TV series in Rwanda called The Bank. It's an entrepreneur pitch show, but unlike the ones unlike Shark Tank, it's not somebody asking for $200,000 for their software or whatever. It is micro entrepreneurship.
Wonderful.
So it's a woman who makes orthopedic shoes, and she needs money to expand production. One of the contestants was a professor at the local university who was making a line of skincare products out of local medicinal plants.
Wonderful.
There was a group of 4 or 5 young men who grew up together in an orphanage. They started a company making beer and wine out of bananas. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Uganda is a huge banana country. So,
wow.
I mean, Rwanda and Uganda. Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of entrepreneurs, and the idea was to have each show would be in a different country.
Mm-hmm.
So I played the role of one of the bankers, one of the four people who decides who gets the money, which was, you know, another fun. But out of all the shows that I've seen African channel do, this one was the most impactful in terms of, you know, 10 entrepreneurs from 10 micro entrepreneurs from a country getting exposure, getting, you know, some resources and getting some expertise help, and then you move on to the next country.
Wow.
So that's how I wound up in film type stuff, kind of serendipitously.
Yeah, and I know this is another story that you could probably wax poetically on, but you've also owned a number of radio stations in your life here in the United States. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. My interest in radio has been for a long time, and I guess the first time I had even considered the possibility of ownership was when I found out that my neighbor across the street, so I grew up with a brother named Gary McClendon, who now lives in the Seattle area. But we grew up across the street from one another. Sometime in the late 70s, I found out that his grandmother owned a radio station in Northern California.
Uh-huh.
And it was called KJOP. And I actually had recalled, when I heard about it, I had recalled hearing it. Because when you drive from San Francisco to L.A. in those days, as you pass Hanford Lemoore, you would hear R&B music.
Okay.
Or jazz. So I remember the station, but I had no idea that Mrs. Beckwith owned it. So when I found out, so me and Gary started going up there hanging out at the station. And, you know, just because it was intriguing and I was a gadget person. I built my first radio when I was, 12?
Okay.
I think.
Like you, I built my first radio from a circuit board when I was about 18 or 19. So, once again, I'm doing my best to follow in your footprints, my brother.
Yeah, you know, in those days, before Radio Shack, Radio Shack used to be something called Tandy.
That's right.
Yes, and you could buy parts or you could buy kits to build. You know, I built a laser when I was 16.
Wow.
And, you know, so, matter of fact, you could build model rockets. They sold rocket engines in those days out of a magazine, mail order. And I built a replica of a Saturn V, and it shot about, 1,000 feet or so. So I was a gadget tour person, and I would take apart things just to understand how they work. So communications and walkie-talkies, and, you know, so I've been playing at that for a while. And then at some point, Mrs. Beckwith decided she would sell her station. That was probably almost 1980 or so. So I put together an effort to try to buy it, and was not successful. But going back to my first big job in the media was as a reporter for the Los Angeles Times with a byline when I was 1980. I was 20-something. And that taught me about the manipulation of information. I would see what comes across the teletype. I'd see the story that went out, and like, that ain't what happened. So it taught me not to believe anybody. And the value of doing your own primary research. And because I've been fortunate to travel broadly, now I know so many people with journalistic capacity around the world. Now when I see something happening on Al Jazeera or BBC or CNN or something, I'll call my friend in wherever that is and what's your take on what I'm seeing on TV? And that was for a while. And then now, since I've been in Africa with the African Media Initiative, the largest umbrella organization of media owners, maybe 500 or so entities, then my ability both to know or I intend on what's going on is vast, and my ability to influence content is formidable. This September 1, I will have been living in Kenya 10 years. So So when I moved to Austin, so before, let's see, 1988 to 93, I was at Motown Records as director of marketing, and also because when I went to Motown, they had no computers.
Mm-hmm.
And my I mean, you can imagine a multi-million-dollar corporation in the late 80s and early 90s with no computers.
Well, you know,
so
all,
I brought mine.
all of them at certain point had no computers. And, of course, you know, your cousins are usually dragging up the rear. It's just amazing to me, and I'm always amazed when I talk to you, when I listen to you. You're at so many crucial crossroads, especially with regard to technological development.
Yeah, and back up just before Motown, I was at the Rhythm and Blues Report, the R&B Report, music trade magazine.
Uh-huh.
But what's important was that in 1980, the transition from the old style of print and typesetting, and you know, I'm fortunate because when we were in junior high school, they made you take things like auto shop or metal shop, I took print shop. So in those days, it was an old, tedious way of making a newspaper.
Right.
So I'm glad I was exposed to that. And then in 1980, when Apple put out the Apple computer, and that was the beginning of desktop publishing. And then the laser writer printer.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so that whole transition into I remember I was trying to do a weekly column on entertainment back here for some of the black newspapers. And this was also in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner, so when I was, Waco's about, you know, an hour or so from Dallas. So I went to visit the publisher, the Waco News Messenger, to talk to him about that. And then he said, okay, I wouldn't mind doing that. I was just trying to get, you know, a paper to pay me $10 a week for a story. And I was trying to get, you know, 100 papers.
Okay.
And so he said, well, I'll do it if you send it to me in wax form. I said, what is wax form? And so when I went, he's still doing the paper on typesetting, and then you have a big sheet of wax that you would make an impression on, and then, you know, that blew my mind. that even that late, that folks were still doing that. But how I wound up buying the radio station was when I got to Austin. I was Dell Computer's first global webmaster in '97. And at the time I moved there was a smooth jazz station in Austin, owned by Lady Bird Johnson. Linda Bird Johnson's wife.
Wow.
Matter of fact, she is a broadcasting pioneer. She broadcasted the first college football game on television in the United States.
That is a fact that I doubt if anyone listening to this program has ever heard. Lady Bird Johnson, first broadcast of a football game, and she owned a smooth jazz radio station. That's amazing.
So yeah, she owned several TV stations, several radio stations. And then one day we woke up and the jazz station was country. And I was like, man, no black music. You know, even though there is a community station called KAZI, which is similar to our KPFK, KPRW. But in terms of commercial station, that was the only commercial station doing any kind of black music. So several of my buddies at Dell was like, hey, why don't we get together and buy a radio station and do some jazz here? Now, she changed the format not because it wasn't making money, but she was in a pissing contest with the owners of the country, the biggest country station in town. So she and the other country station were at war, and then she flipped that one just to mess with them. Okay. So anyway, that's when my interest in radio came up in terms of, okay, let's buy a radio station. So just in '97, the African Music Festival, which was founded by Oko Drama from Gambia, that is the premier event in African music. It was kind of like the Sunsplash is for reggae music. Anybody who's anybody in African music has been on Oko's show. Started in 1983, and everybody you can think of as an African music star or master of an indigenous instrument, they've been on Oko's festival. I met him in '85 and started working with him then, trying to bring the festival to Los Angeles. So we succeeded in '97, And what we do the day before the festival is have what we call the ambassadors reception for the artists and the dignitaries and the community leaders and what have you. And we decided that we would have Magnificent Montague. So for those who don't know, Magnificent Montague was America's most popular disc jockey in the 60s. And if you heard the phrase "Burn, Baby, Burn," that's him. Matter of fact, he gets paid. That's trademark, and it's him. And he gets paid everybody anytime you're using it. But
I guess I owe him a little bit of money.
So he was number one disc jockey in New York, and then he moved to Chicago. And again, he was Burn Baby Burn in New York, and then he moved to Chicago, number one in Chicago, Burn Baby Burn. Then he moved to Los Angeles and was at KGFJ. And
I do remember KGFJ.
Yep, it was the community glue.
Yeah, that was the people's soundtrack, most certainly.
Absolutely. So when the '60s LA rebellion occurred, he was the police department called a radio station to ask him to stop saying "Burn, Baby, Burn." And he said, "This had nothing to do. I've been doing Burn, Baby, Burn for years." And not only did he not stop, he escalated to "Burn, Los Angeles, Burn."
Ooh.
And so he eventually was kind of banned from radio. So he wound up quietly consulting people, putting them in radio stations, regular folks. You know, a woman owned a beauty station, a beauty salon. He would put her on a station. Famous Amos had the biggest radio station in Maui.
I never knew that.
Montague got him in, and then in addition, he was collecting these African American memorabilia, and this was before the museum in D.C. He has one of the largest collections in the world. All of Frederick Douglass's books signed in mint condition. Phyllis Wheatley's book. George Washington Carver made 3 paintings out of peanut oil paint. He had one of the 3. If you saw the movie Amistad, the ship's manifest, which was the central piece of the movie, is on his coffee table.
Wow.
Spoken word by Langston Hughes in his own voice. A recording of the first black recording star in the United States. And nobody can guess his name or who he is. I imagine. His name is George Johnson. And he had a tune out called Whistling Coon. And that became the biggest selling recording in the United States.
Wow.
So he recorded for both Edison and another company back, this is like 1898. And so he sold 50,000 copies of that recording.
Wow.
And it ain't 50,000 like we do mass production 50,000 these days. That was, each one was a master.
Yeah, I was going to say they didn't have the mass production for those wax, and I think they made them out of wax molds or something like that.
The cylinders they made out of wax.
Okay.
But yeah, so they would have. So he's sitting in a chair or whatever, and they'd have, you know, the recording devices. They had the feed horn like the RCA dog.
That's right.
Yeah. So it would be 3 or 4 machines with their feed horns pointing at him, and then he would sing the song. And that's 4 masters. And then so he sing the song all day. And maybe, I don't know how many he could do today, so maybe he can sing the song, 30 times. That's 30 times 4. So how long do you have to do that to get to 50,000?
That would be a couple of weeks.
So it's mind-boggling to even think about.
And it just reminds us, Meredith, and I do want to, we had a few talking points I wanted to get to, but this reminds us that you and I, we stand upon the shoulders of giants, my brother, truly giants, and our people in this generation really, really need to realize that everything our great ancestors have done before have prepared us to do the greatest for people that's ever been done. And I really want the people to understand you as a very high accomplishing Pan-African and persons like myself, and there are a number of us who are walking deliberately along this pathway. It's an incredible time of great opportunity as Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum is talking about COVID-19, the Great Reset. We have to ask the question, what is in our hands? What is on our plate?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I'm going to do a kind of a hard right turn. Bear with me. Obviously, you and I are going to have to come up with a way of having you more frequently on the LIB radio. I say that every time you're on. I have a few talking points I wanted to share with you. If you don't mind, can we focus on these?
Yes, sir.
The topic today, and our guest, for those just tuning in, this is the program you want to tell your friends to tell their friends to tune into. Get the link, get the YouTube link, get the Facebook link, share it, share it, share it, because this is the conversation that will transform our reality. I'm promising you this. This is what we are here to do. And this is why Meredith Beal is not only my guest today, but he's a guest, and everybody who hears about what he does, they all want to interview Meredith Beal. Today we're talking about the future of Pan-African media and communications. I just opened up the Blog Talk line. Do not call the studio line today, as my guest is on that line, and I don't want to hear it beep, beep, beep in the background. 646-716-9835. Point number one, Brother Meredith. How are African nations using OTT, over-the-top technology, media communications, to most effective means of building transnational collaborative partnerships?
The platforms are there. More and more streaming video platforms are emerging. But what's not happening from the standpoint of your question is the transnational collaborative partnerships. You see more folks getting together, which is a good thing, in their own country, and in the past when there may have been barriers to entry and there are fewer barriers to entry, they're also collaborating. Somebody may have great content but doesn't have equipment or doesn't have resources. So that's what I saw occurring when I got there in 2011, 2012. You started to see more of that happening, where especially with young folks who were in their 20s or something, they were limited in their resources, but they were extremely talented and developed whatever they developed. And once they started saying, "Hey, I have piece A. Who has piece B and piece C that we need to make this a viable thing?" So that's happening. The expansion of what is going to make this click and go exponentially higher in impact is once there's ubiquitous Wi-Fi. And I don't know why it's taking so long. All kinds of reasons. Some of them technical, some of them political, some of them just environment, inertia, everything else. But that is the game changer because it's proven that everywhere there is connectivity, there's growth and there's progress, economic progress. So that's still. I remember back during the middle of COVID. So this must have been just before COVID got heightened. So maybe February, March. I was in Kenya, and President Kenyatta announced that Google had been in talks with their Ministry of Information, and we're testing Google Loom. So you might, if you're not familiar, Google had this program where they were using balloons, high altitude balloons in the stratosphere, to bounce signals off to provide Wi-Fi for those areas. So at the time I was watching this press conference, Kenyatta said, right now in the air, basically he said it was operational, which was a misstatement. And so after I got off, I was like, that couldn't be happening without me knowing it. They'd had to have been doing this, if it's operational, I mean, they had to have been doing this a while. And they couldn't be doing this a while while I'm here and I not see. Yeah. So when I started to check, indeed, they were in a testing phase. And about maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, they closed down Google Loom. They shut down the whole program, period. Another effort that I thought was
Now, just
promising
on
was
that point, do you think they shut it down because Elon Musk has kind of
no,
trumped them with his satellite network?
no. I think it was different issues.
Okay.
And then, like I said, there was another promising effort going on where Google had put, I think it was called Google Station. They were testing it in Lagos. And this is like putting down a box and there's free Wi-Fi for 10 miles outside of that, the compass around whatever that point is. So they were testing that in Lagos. And so I approached the country director for Google and asked him, what about doing that in a small country like Gambia? You could do Wi-Fi in Gambia just like that for the whole country. And what was not compelling to them is too small a market. They say, okay, we'll do it. So it's more like if you get 4 or 5 countries over there together, we'll go do it. But obviously, Nigeria with 250 million people, then that's worth it for them. So that's the other factor. I personally have been trying to encourage some of the tech CEOs I used to work for and work with to do the same thing. Let's pick a small country and go juice it up, make it the deal, make it the 21st century African city.
Yeah.
Country.
I've particularly fallen in love with Uganda, which I think would be a great model for that. One, it is a part of the rapidly emerging East African community. Uganda is also a beautiful bridge state right on the border of the DRC, which to me is the biggest prize on the planet. And also,
Absolutely.
Uganda is the second youngest nation in the world. And as a consequence, the investments and the changes that we're able to impress in Uganda and other nations like that will be lasting and vibrant and exciting as this new young generation grows into these things.
Yeah, no, Uganda is, I love Uganda. It's a roots place. It's a down-to-earth place, and it's a real place compared to some other African countries I've been in that are more pretentious.
Yeah, I know what you mean about that point. We love them more, but some of them...
Part of the challenge there is with the governance and the fear of the governance of the power of internet in those young folks' hands. So, they're going about it in a, I don't know what the attitude is, maybe kind of a judicious way. But I mean, if you can see, like, for example, during the elections, and they shut down the internet.
That's right.
Last time. So the political will for a totally empowered, unencumbered internet, that's going to be a minute. So, but, and, like I had always considered Gambia maybe the smallest country, but a few days ago I was talking with a friend of mine who had made a proposal to Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini, and it was a formidable plan. I thought it very interesting, and then after when I saw it, it's like, oh, that's right, there is a country smaller than Gambia. So you can take something like Lesotho or Swaziland and with not a whole lot of resources, juice it up. But more of what I do see happening, yes, there probably are at least 150 platforms for video content. And
well, let me go on.
Some of them are going to fall out. Some of them are going to fall out because just of the inertia of business.
And of course, they all require a direct investment, and sometimes that foreign direct investment is not necessarily coming from people who have true Pan-African ideas as their motivation.
Say that again? You broke up.
These investments will all need direct investment in collaboration, and too often that type of investment collaboration is not committed to true Pan-African morality and ideology.
Oh, absolutely. That's true, because, again, you have people with all kinds of motivations. And you mentioned before, the biggest prize on the planet is the DRC. Mm-hmm. And that's why there is so much trouble there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me, oh, boy, this is just so fascinating. Literally, every time I hear you talk, it opens my mind to 12 more comments and branches off of that. Let's just go forward. Talking point number 2. Why is this narrative called Africa Rising such an important theme to unite multiple sectors for sustained development? Africa Rising and sustained development.
Well, I think everybody knows that there's been long, unjust suffering. And, you know, I remember when I first recited my Africa Rising poem. Let me back up. When I wrote it was 1999 going into 2000, into the millennium. And I was looking at, okay, this is Africa's millennium. And what also brought that to the fore was that my mentor, a Japanese peace builder by the name of Daisaku Ikeda, back in the 1960s, he made a prediction that Africa would be the continent of the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And he likened it to a pot of boiling water with a cover on it. Once the cover's removed, there's this rush of energy. And so when I moved to Kenya, there's an event called the Highway Africa. It's the largest annual gathering of journalists on the continent. Mm-hmm. And the theme of that, the first one I attended, was Africa Rising. And what they contrasted was the cover of The Economist magazine in 2000 had the headline, Africa, the hopeless continent. Mm. That was the year 2000. The cover of The Economist magazine said Africa, right, the hopeless continent.
I do recall that. Then, I recall that issue.
Then, so now we're in 2012, and the headline on The Economist is Africa Rising.
That's right. I have both of those images. I put both of those images together as I began more and more to be informed of and an informative voice for Africa Rising. I put those two Economist covers, juxtapose them, and say, if the Economists can change their mind about Africa's future and destiny, what will it take to get our African-American brothers and sisters to change their mind as well?
Great point, great point. And back to Mr. Ikeda, he also recently said, and this is in maybe a book about 3 or 4 years ago, in a dialogue with Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, in a dialogue around improvisation and creativity. And in that book, he's made the statement that the world will not prosper until the home of the origin of humanity, until the people in the home of the origin of humanity prosper. Mm-hmm. So, matter of fact, recently I had, I recited the poem for the first time at that event. And then just a few months ago, I did it in Swahili. I don't know if you saw it or not, but I'll send a link again to you if you want to post it on for your audience.
Oh, absolutely.
But I did it again in Swahili, and there's a young lady now translating it into Arabic. I want to do it in all of the African Union official languages. Mm-hmm.
And it's on your YouTube page, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And the YouTube page for everyone. I just put the link up on the Facebook postings, and I'll put it up on you now and put it out on Twitter, where you can get access to Meredith Beal, Meredith Beal. It's Beal, not Be-all. And you can see that poem, Africa Rising. I did get a chance to share it with our listening audience after we did our last program. And yes, it is very inspiring. It comes directly from your heart.
And thank you. And the Swahili version is not up there yet. We're doing some color corrections so that they could broadcast it on the Swahili TV stations.
Awesome. That is really awesome.
That'll be up there soon, too.
Mm-hmm. Let me get you.
but like I said, that theme is those two words trigger the imagery, the intention, and the destination all at once.
In my mind, I imagine Africa Rising to be such an iconic, inspiring theme. Two words that is like whenever I see the terms or read the terms or speak the terms of Africa Rising, it's like raising a flag on a flagpole.
Yep.
And so we want more of our people.
Yes,
and it's amazing how many.
Campaign. I'm just saying it's a continual campaign that's the same thread from the past.
Yes, this is the same inspiring foundation for people like Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, so many others.
Even though now
so
you brought that
others.
up, I want to address that. The problem with some of our early freedom fighters, we in the U.S., so during the civil rights struggle, when we were following Malcolm and Martin and the Black Panthers and all the folks who were trying to liberate us. Going back to the time of independence, there were two prevailing movements as the Europeans were releasing their stakes on the continent. And the one was the Monrovia Group and one was the Morocco Group.
Right.
Remember that? So there was a block of countries. There were two different mindsets about how quickly we need to go into full management of our own countries. And the Morocco Group said, we're ready for independence now.
That's right.
And the Monrovia Group said, no, we need to do it slowly. In my opinion, and in my studies and research, the Monrovia Group was influenced by Europeans. Crispin and folks here behind said, hey, if we do it this way, you can be in control.
That's right.
And so when the Monrovia Group went out in that decision, Africa lost in the process.
You make an excellent point.
Created those little factional, individual power cliques
that still linger.
And tempting, the human temptation. And so when I got to Kenya, I saw something that disturbed me. That is, the amount of property that the Kenyatta family owns in that country is disturbing to me.
It's almost as if they're trying to create a dynasty now?
Not almost. And I'm not the one to use the word. Kenyans are talking about that now. There's an effort. Let me back up a bit. Still, like I said, during that time, so you had Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta and Nelson Mandela and Milka Pride. You had all of these leaders in various countries who were sincerely leading this fight. And then, so we've gotten to the point where the Europeans were battered enough to relinquish this first level hold they had on our land and people. And so in my opinion, had we gone with the Morocco Group into how do we manage for ourselves now, it would have freed us up from the repercussions of the Berlin Conference. And carving up Africa the way they wanted to and creating impediments for us to prevent our unity.
And if I could just add, to your points, I think that the Go Quickly movement was timed right about the time that we saw China come from under centuries of grip, the Chinese Communist Party finally consolidating, going through the Cultural Revolution and everything, with Mao Zedong. When they finally emerged from that, now we look at China's position now. If the Go Quickly movement had been able to consolidate itself, then I think it would have spared Africa maybe 2 decades of the Washington Consensus with the IMF and the World Bank gutting the prospects for African countries to sustain a rate of development and economic emergence that was actually rivaling and exceeding many of the Asian tigers. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. And then the other factor related to China's growth is the fact that they've not been to war since World War I. I mean, a real war.
Mm-hmm.
So their resources have not been squandered. Yes, they've been building a military, but they've not been paying for war.
Mm-hmm.
So they applied all of those savings into development and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Of course, they did go to war in Korea and some skirmishes in Vietnam and India, but I know what you're talking about, total mobilization
I'm
for
talking
killing.
about, but how long has it been since they've been in a war like that?
Yeah, China doesn't fight wars. China, I've documented how China fought the West like 3 times in a century, and the West never wants to fight China again.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I'm saying. So it's been 50 years since they've been spending the kind of money that war eats up every day, every week.
That's right. Yeah,
so,
excellent point.
So, but we are getting there in terms of the impediments created by the Berlin Conference and its aftermath are slowly coming down with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That was the first thing, to be able to make some shoes in Uganda and sell them next door in Kenya and they be affordable.
And that's
or vice versa.
That's brand new. That AFCFTA is just going into enactment as of the 1st of January of 2021. Am I correct?
Yes, and obviously the pandemic put everybody behind. But yes, so somewhere around April, it was April last year, April 2020, in Rwanda, a group called the Afro Champions. This is a group of millionaires and billionaires organized by Dangote from Nigeria, and so they had a confab to look at the implementation of the AFTA, and so that was April, and they did have that gathering, but again, just days after, everybody kind of shut down for a while in terms of a lot of the fundamental work. But it hasn't stopped the progress. We're just slower. But yes, so that's in place. The other major thing was the free movement of people from country to country, and the imminent arrival of the African passport. It's already been ratified in the sense that maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, all the foreign ministers of every African country came to Nairobi, and they agreed on the format and the protocols and the biometrics that will be used in this common African passport.
And I believe Mr. Dangote
probably no more than
Mr. Dangote said he has one. It's not necessarily as valuable as he would will it to be, but he said he has one. I think him in a conversation between him and Mo Ibrahim, they were talking about the validity of this passport.
Yeah, but so it won't be long. A year or two, and this ability to not be harassed from country to country, and a lot. That's not to say that right away all of the attitudes will stop. I mean, South Africans and Nigerian customs people mess with one another. I don't think that's going to stop right away just because, people's minds ain't changing just because you can change some rules.
Well, that's like British customs. It's like British customs and African Americans. They're afraid we're going to get over there and cause some uprising amongst their chattel population of African people. You make an excellent point there. Let me just ask you this, because you are extensively into information communication technologies, ICT. I am of the opinion that this new AFCFTA and other policies developing across the continent demand that a new generation of blockchain coders come in and be able to digitize the movement of people, goods, and services and finances across African borders. Your thought on that?
Yes, absolutely. You are correct. I agree with that analysis and the potential of that. Even you see right now just how quickly the topic of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, is a really hot topic. So yes, I think it's going back to the same way. Like, remember back, that must have been the 70s, that India decided that they would have every primary school pupil learn HTML. And 30 years later, so when I went to Dell, that's why all the visas were Indians. Because they had been coding for 20 years.
Wow.
So in the same way, because I remember back in early 90s, 91, 92, 90, somewhere around there, the Los Angeles African American Economic Council had this gathering to look at, what do we need to do to go move forward. And what I was recommending was, let's look at the future jobs. So at the time, they knew that by 2020 there would be 150,000 jobs in intelligent highway vehicle systems. And so at the time, California already knew that they wanted 20,000 of those jobs. So I'm saying, we as the black community in LA, we should say, okay, we want 4,000 of them jobs. And now let's look at who's in middle school right now that we can start training, so that we'll have this bank or army of folks with that skill set ready when those jobs are there. So that's how we should have been moving, in my opinion, as a community, looking at those future potentials and creating training and capacity building and developing our populace to be able to do that. So I think right now that same thing's going on. The two arenas that I see the biggest potential for our young folks is in the gaming arena and in blockchain. Gaming, because the gaming industry makes more money than everybody in terms of entertainment. They make more money than film, TV, music, and sports put together. And also, you saw during the pandemic when the traditional production stopped in the TV film, gaming never stopped.
Let me ask you this question. African-based call centers. One of my comrades in Uganda has set up a call center with about 50 desks, and he's looking to find some partners around the world that will take advantage of a Ugandan-based call center. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an emerging area for them. Kenya leads the world in technology, in like phone technology, for example, with M-Pesa and the ability to transact and send money, et cetera.
That was invented
but before then, Kenya was the world's call center because it was a place for cheap labor that could speak English and had basic technical skills. So the Kenyan visionary, Dr. Batangi Ndemo, who is the person most responsible for East Africa jumping up like it did, leapfrogging in technology, because he's the one who secured the fiber optic cable in the Indian Ocean that connects right at Mombasa, right at the Indian Ocean port of Kenya.
Is that one of those second-generation bundles that carry, I think, at 1.3 terabytes per second?
Say it again?
Is that one of the second-generation fiber optic bundles that have been dropped around Africa? I believe the second generation carry 1.3 terabytes of data per second.
Actually, I think it's faster than that.
Wow.
He did a deal with Dubai, and I did do a story on him in Hollywood Weekly back in November. And he had talked about when he first took office as the permanent secretary for the Ministry of ICT in Kenya, African countries had been bickering over, connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So he was tired of the bickering. He went on and cut a deal with Dubai to go drop that marine cable there. And so the two elements of that, having the connectivity at that speed,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that they had a good number of young people with basic computer skills.
Mm-hmm.
So with basic computer skills and you speak English, then that's all they need for a call, and connectivity, and you got a call center. So
mm-hmm.
so Kenya was the call center, was the biggest English call center for a long time until the 2007 election,
mm-hmm.
which the post-election violence killed their call center market, basically.
Wow.
And by that I mean that the election between Raila Odinga and Kibaki,
mm-hmm.
It was the kind of situation that reminds me of Gore Bush.
Mm-hmm.
We went to bed thinking Gore won, and when we woke up, Bush was president.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
something similar happened. Kenyans went to bed thinking Raila won, and when they woke up, Kibaki won. So they went to war.
Mm. Were you there during the era of?
People died.
Were you there during the era of Kibaki?
No, that was yes, I was. I came in on the tail end. So he 2007 to 2012 was his term. I moved there in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So I did meet him, that first maybe 2 or 3 months,
mm-hmm.
and he was aging and slowing, and it was time.
Yeah, from my
he didn't fall
investigation.
asleep at the chair, but
Well, from my
Go
analysis of Kenyan history, I didn't see anything get done while Kibaki was president.
I don't know. I didn't really have enough time there to observe what was going on. I saw the tail end.
And that's maybe not that important a topic. A couple of points you made, and I think this is opportunity. For one, you talked about the fiber optic bundles, and earlier talking about the critical need for Wi-Fi to be aggressively promoted across the continent. Do you think that these Wi-Fi bundles have been dropped all around the coastline of the African continent, provide an opportunity for foreign investors to go through to lease part of this data stream and set up Wi-Fi distribution networks?
You're breaking up badly. I didn't hear much of that question.
Okay, let me repeat it maybe just a little bit slower. With all of these fiber optic bundles being dropped around the coast of the continent, is this an opportunity for foreign investment to come in, lease part of that data stream, and set up Wi-Fi distribution networks?
I don't know. That sounds kind of cumbersome to me. I think we need a cleaner solution that is simpler, more holistic. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
I'm breaking up. Can I call back in?
Yeah, can you just redial the same number, or I can call you on the other line if we don't have a good connection.
Let me text you the number right quick, and you call me on another line.
Okay. Well, I can call you on my other line, or did you want to come? You want to call me back on a second telephone from your end?
Which is easier?
You call me back.
Okay. What's the number? Or
323.
the same number you call me on?
The same one I'm on right now. 323-328-1863. But either one will get you through. All right. Bear with me as we reconnect the guests. I hope you, our listening audience, are listening to the caliber and the quality of the guests that I have today. This is truly groundbreaking. You sound great, Brother Meredith. So I'm just telling my listening audience, they must be taking detailed notes, because this is the future of Pan-African collaborative sustainable development that you and I are talking today. Okay, he's having a hard time connecting, so we're going to get that through. Again, for you on our Facebook family listening audience, we encourage you to also use our YouTube connection to be able to continue the monetization. I have you up, Brother Meredith.
All right, I can hear you clear now.
Very good.
Give me that quick again.
Let's continue. I want to pick it up from the talking points? Oh, and the second question about my friend in Kampala who had the 50-desk call center. Perhaps it might be, according to what I'm hearing from you, it might be a better idea to begin to train those 50-desk call centers, to train them and start to train them in blockchain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because everything is going to have to go there. I mean, if you look at the promise of blockchain is very impactful in the intellectual property protection arena.
Mm-hmm.
So once blockchain is on, then that's gonna handle piracy to a big extent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We hear you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, there you are.
Yes, you sound good.
Yeah, so I was saying, the other thing is like, even stuff like treaties between countries going across borders. You know, the pandemic exposed a lot of other vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So now, you know, they're dealing with blockchain on those types of things. So it's going to be so ubiquitous in our everyday lives that's where we start training our young people now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, in with respect to your guy in Uganda, and I do know a couple of folks training some, you know, there are some iHub type gathering points for young people to learn tech stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're very robust in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where kids should be hanging out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that gives me
organizing or doing that in a systematic way so that we get good numbers of those well trained, and you know, feed them into some sort of pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that gives me great room to go back to them and talk to them about making that an effective, not just a catch-up position, but a take-the-lead position. And I think you may not be aware of that I'm now a regular correspondent, a weekly correspondent on Day Baker program out of Kampala, Uganda, a program on Friday mornings there they call the Pan-African Debate. I've been on the program now for about 4 months, and let me tell you, being on national media in an African country, although it's a relatively small TV station, but nonetheless, is an incredible position. You just get so much opportunity when you get access to media like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
and Uganda is an important place, you know, because of, as you mentioned, the youth demographic and the energy, power, and resources. I mean, I love the jungle
mm-hmm.
there, and you know, gorillas, and you know, it's such a rich environment. And as you said, next door is the DRC. Mm-hmm. And the gem of the earth. That's why there's always trouble there, because everybody wants to rip off a piece of the DRC.
That's right. And it also occupies the continent's largest freshwater lake, Lake Nyanza.
Yeah, very, very true. I'd like to switch now to a topic last week, or the week before last. There was a celebration of the Battle of Adwa, which mm-hmm. few African Americans are aware of. So I thought I would take this opportunity to say a little bit about it.
Oh, absolutely. Great topic.
So the Battle of Adwa, which is on March the 1st, it was celebrating 125 years. So this is late 1800s. And this is the battle where Ethiopian, as one of the only two African countries that have never been colonized by anybody, the Battle of Adwa was a decisive battle which determined that Ethiopia would not be colonized by Italy. So Italy was kind of late in the colony getting game, and they had established a colony in Eritrea, and were using that as a base to try to move into Ethiopia. So that battle, once the the Ethiopians won militarily. That was the first time during that period that an African country had defeated a European country militarily. Mm-hmm. And so, considering that all of the rest of the African countries had succumbed, and the expectation was kind of the same, that's why this battle was such an important point. But it wasn't just a victory for Ethiopia. That battle gave courage to the rest of the African nations that were struggling for their independence, and also empowered the global African struggle for independence, meaning Haiti, Jamaica, Brazil. All of those were rallied by the Battle of Adwa. We don't know anything about it here, but during the time, it was a resounding encouragement for black people in the world. And so weekend before last, the Ethiopian consulate here in Los Angeles wanted to celebrate it, but they also wanted to do it in the context of Black History Month. So the Battle of Adwa took place on March 1st. So on February the 28th, they did a virtual celebration, and two historians did presentations. The first did the presentation about the specifics of the battle. The second guy framed the context from the perspective of this global African struggle and how important that battle was to mm-hmm. everybody else. So I did, they asked me to share a poem, and initially I was going to do one of my kind of standard poems from my book. Mm-hmm. But I'm in the middle of the sequel to Victory Every Day. Victory Every Day is the book of photographs of my travels around the world set to poems and song lyrics and prose. Mm-hmm. And so the follow-up book, Victory Moment to Moment, I was planning to publish this past December, but I got delayed by COVID like everybody else. But in that book, I had a photo already called At a Sunrise, which I took back in 2013 when I was there for a conference. And so I had this page in the new book with the photo and the title At a Sunrise, but it's blank. I hadn't gotten around to writing the poem yet. So after they asked me to share something, and when I found out, instead of doing my own poem, I thought that I should do something on topic. So I did some more research on the battle. And then I ran across a film on Adwa by Haile Gerima, the filmmaker who did Sankofa.
That's right.
And so I got the Adwa film, and I watched it and kind of tried to digest it. And then I wrote this poem kind of imagining what Ethiopians thought like the day of the battle, wondering whether or not they were going to win or whether they were going to wind up being slaves. And then the next morning when they woke up and found out that they had won. So that is this poem, At a Sunrise, that I'd like to share with you right now.
I would be honored. We would be honored if you would share that poem.
At a Sunrise. Our people hail from ancient times, before the earliest records of man, living and dreaming under the sun in this sacred land. They dreamed of the future, holding high dreams for the generations to come, praying that they too will live their lives freely under the Ethiopian sun. But then the dark clouds of oppression came marching toward the land, threatening to bring misery and strife from a distant land. The challenge for us all is whether we can stand together in unity to dispel the evil scaffold. Surely we can. We can never allow our ancestors' hopes and dreams to be trampled under the brutal feet of foreign invaders, drunken by imperial desires, with darkened hearts poisoned by the illusion of white superiority, and starving from the endless hunger of greed. Tomorrow, when we awaken, will we arise to see that yesterday was not the last of our story, that despite the imperial dreams of others, our land remains free, free to savor the glory our elders held so dear. Yes, surely we can stand, fight our feet. Morning after the great battle, we all rose to see that we're still free to live independently. The most glorious sunrise that could ever be, victorious, joyous, hopeful, and free. To our ancestors, surely they find no surprise that we live to see another free added sunrise, cherishing the gem of freedom left by elders past, a freedom that we vow will last and last and last. We continue to thrive under Ethiopian skies as we greet the most magnificent, victorious, Addis sunrise. Asante Sana. Thank you.
Asante Sana. Spectacular. I need an applause button for that one. I was feeling you. I was feeling you. It was like a flag being raised as we continue to rise under Addis Ethiopian skies. This is absolutely beautiful. I sure do love that poem. Very inspiring. We're gonna.
I will also send it to you. I'll send you in. Send it to you right now on Facebook, and you can share it with your folks.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if there's a YouTube link to you reading the poem, I think that would be most valuable. We're going to have to begin to wrap up today's show, but we're going to be coming back to you in all the times necessary for our people to get inspired. Let me just ask you a couple of questions. So the second question I'm going to ask you is a few calls to action for people who truly hear what this conversation today was about and realize that they do hold a piece of this puzzle that unlocks this dynamic African future that is going to amaze the world, astonish the world, just like Marcus Garvey had predicted 100 years ago. But before we get to those calls to action, how do you deal, Brother Meredith, with the frustration of convincing African Americans of just how important is our role in committing to sustainable Pan-African development? I mean, many of our Pan-African American brothers and sisters who claim to be Pan-African, they've never heard of the AU Agenda 2063.
Very true. And part of that's the AU fault, and part of it's the rest of us fault. There's two ways.
That's right.
There's not a frustration on my end because I realize kind of how it came to be that way. And obviously we have been under constant pressure, and an unlimited amount of resources have been used to make us think a certain way and behave a certain way. And that's been going on a long, long time, and a lot of resources have been committed to do that. So I wouldn't be discouraged if it takes a minute to undo that. I am encouraged by the rate of change. You mentioned the global reset, and triggered by Corona. That's going to equalize a lot of stuff. And because the world is still in improvisation mode, there's a lot of opportunity. Where there's chaos, there's opportunity. There's a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of opportunity. And post-COVID, so many things were revealed in terms of vulnerabilities or opportunities. For example, simple stuff like, you've been able to order your groceries on the internet and not leave the house for the longest. But it wasn't until people were forced to that they realized the convenience. And so once COVID ends, the people who used to drive to the grocery store now realize, hey, I don't have to use my gas and stand in line with a bunch of people, and I don't mind paying the $4 more or $5, whatever it is, for the convenience to bring it at the house. So things like that. Telemedicine is skyrocketing. That sector is going to be huge. And then even new opportunities, like the fact that most corporations are not having physical board meetings. And so, say even a small business, how adept might they be at running Zoom? Maybe they need to go get a high school student or a college